To know the greatest gift of mediumship? Well, this morning you're in for a special treat because we're going to explore that topic today on Wednesdays with Willa. This is my weekly podcast show that airs on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium. Also goes out on the Lilydale Assembly Facebook page, as well as my YouTube channel. So you got lots of places that you can tune in to Wednesdays with Willa and enjoy the shows of great guests and wonderful topics. And we focus typically on spiritualism, mediumship, healing, faith, family, or more. And I encourage you to look back at the archive videos of Wednesdays with Willa. This is year 8 of episodes, so you've got lots of past shows that you can binge to your heart's content. I also encourage you to like and share, subscribe, and all those good things so that I can keep bringing you more wonderful shows and more wonderful guests. And I am delighted to have back on my show today, Ron Skowronski. Hello, Ron.
Great to see you. Great to see all of you, kind of. I'm not really seeing you all, but in a manner of speaking.
You see us more
Yes.
than we see you. In that sense.
You bet. You bet. Wonderful to be here, really.
Oh, yes. Ron is a humorist, I would say this.
Like my father before me.
That's right. A long line of humorists. And he's also an ordained minister, and he's served for years in spiritualism at spiritualist churches and throughout Lilydale. So many of you probably recognize him from either one of the church services or from the summer auditorium platform, or even the historical walking tours that happen in the summer during the program of events. Usually, is that
time to time we refer to those as the hysterical walking tours. But
and some people call them ghost walks, but they're really just history tours of Lilydale. Yeah. And so Ron is really well versed in the history of Lilydale and spiritualism. We're talking decades and decades and decades, and very much a trusted minister. You have provided pastoral care to so many people throughout the years, and people call upon Ron to help them through many of life's difficulties. And you have officiated many weddings and funerals and all the like, with a wonderful balance of humor, but also bringing the solemnity. You have a wonderful balance of those things. So thank you, Ron.
Pshaw. Thank you.
Some of you may know Ron's wife from the library in the summer here at Lilydale, Marion Skidmore Library. She's been a wonderful resource there to help welcome patrons to view the books. And so long-standing.
She had a bit of a rough year because she fell and cracked her wrist and damaged her pelvis. She was sitting in a chair in the library, and she went zig and the chair went zag, but she's doing 1,000% better. And she was not here for basically the entire season, but
which is unlike her. Yeah, for sure.
It hurt to have her do that. Yeah. It was terrible, but she'll be back by popular demand this coming season. So looking forward to seeing all of you, because it's really in her heart to represent spiritualism through the library, and she's done it now. It would have been, but it will be her 25th anniversary.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, and Cecil is a good person for that. She grew up in spiritualism.
Oh, yeah.
And her mother was Betty Schultz. If anybody remembers that name, she was a registered medium for many, many years. So yes, this is a family.
People still say, your mother-in-law is Betty Schultz. I go, yeah, but my name is Ron Skowronski. No, I'm going to go, your mother-in-law is Betty.
You know how it is when you're known by somebody else.
Betty was, and still in many regards is regarded as a legend because of her integrity and her, she was probably one of the, and I don't say this because she's family, but she was one of the best evidential spirit mediums that I've had the privilege of working with over many years. And she's been gone now. This will be, I believe this past November was 10 years.
Decade.
Long time.
Wow.
Long time.
Well, she's still moving and shaking in the layout.
But she's not giving me the lotto numbers. But we
know.
talk about that regularly. But
It doesn't happen.
there's silence on that subject. So.
Well, I did mention that Ron's been on the show before, so I encourage you to look back at the archive videos of our past shows, which I did post one just yesterday as a replay for people to enjoy called "Missing Them at Christmas," and the other ones have revolved around spiritualism, mediumship. We also did a wonderful one on Florence Shinn.
Oh my gosh, that was one of my favorites.
Yeah. Anybody who wants to know about Florence Shinn, go back and watch that episode.
Absolutely. Anybody
writer,
tremendous metaphysical writer, part of New Thought. If you're inclined to Google New Thought, and you will see a cavalcade of extraordinary writers, Florence being one of the more readable and understandable. Because we all banter about the word metaphysics like it's, talking about a recipe for making a chocolate cake. It can get complicated.
It sure can.
And
it can also get dry.
Yeah, it is dry.
But
we have our own Andrew Jackson Davis, the king of dry, when he wrote the Pen and Tralia or whatever. There are. I find it fascinating. I find some of the most profound minds in spiritualism as well as in, for example, New Thought. If you were to hear them, and I've had the privilege in a couple of cases of hear them deliver lectures or sermons, if you will, and just inspiring and wonderful. And then you read their books and go, I can't read this, because they maybe didn't take, the best writing course in college or something.
There's that, but then there's an archaic language that you sometimes have
very
to
much so.
Through.
Very
absolutely.
Much so. Yeah.
But there are many delightful authors, and I'm so glad that you came on the show to feature Florence Shinn.
Yep.
We should do another one of those.
We'll do that again. Awesome. We can do. There's a bunch.
And before I forget, before we really delve into our topic, which is the greatest gift of mediumship, we should mention that Ron is doing his annual bowl burning ceremony at the Church of the Living Spirit here in the Laydale. I believe it's going to be a hybrid service so that people can still do Zoom, or is it just in person? I've
got to be honest with you. Usually they've tried, from what I've remembered, they've tried to do it hybrid, but I always tell folks, weather permitting, it is the kind of an experience you want to do in person.
There we go.
And that'll be on Friday, the 27th of December. I believe it's at 7. There's a lot of white hairs here, and that usually indicates a few more senior moments than I'd like to have. So please, when I give you times and dates, unless they're historical, check the Lilydale website, or in this case, the Church of the Living Spirit, and that'll be it'll be an opportunity, as it always has been, to reflect and release the old, and to embrace the newness of 2025 coming. And of course, no matter where you are, I call it on the spectrum of life, whether you're having a very difficult time or whether you're, having a cakewalk, it's always a really good opportunity to remember that nature abhors a vacuum. You don't want to leave your consciousness, your mentality filled with things that no longer serve you. And so the purpose of this service, I used to call it a burning bowls ceremony.
I said bowl burning. We're not burning bowls.
We're not burning any bowls. No bowls have been harmed in the production.
Scraps of pieces of paper that you write things down on, and those get burned.
No bowls have been harmed in the production of this service. I call it fire communion. And it's the same thing because of its emotional and its I call it, of course, spiritual significance. It's a ritual, it's a ceremony, whatever term you choose to use, that exemplifies an inner yearning to, again, what we do every year: release the old and embrace the new.
Yes.
So much healthier than, 3 bottles of champagne and a $400 hotel bill. So come to the church.
Yes.
And please join us. It's always meaningful, we think.
Yeah.
We hope. And we always like to have an opportunity to see old friends that we haven't seen. And since a lot of our old friends here were covered by 4 metric tons of snow, we just want to count the ones that got through it, and we don't have to go dig out anymore.
There you go.
So
there you go. But it's really about decluttering from
Yep.
this past year and resetting for the new year.
Absolutely.
So if you're interested in that, please join Ron and others at the Church of the Holy
Yeah.
Spirit.
I've been privileged, and I mean that sincerely, to do this service. I want to say a decade.
Yeah, it must be.
It's got to be a long time, and I never get tired of it. And I hope nobody gets tired of me, because I haven't got a pink slip in my envelope yet. So not yet.
Not yet. Well, we better go ahead and jump into our topic today, which is the greatest gift of mediumship.
Absolutely.
What does that mean?
Well, I started thinking, and it's one of those things where this is that time of year. You mentioned, we were talking earlier and talking about the holiday season, and especially this year for some reason. And I don't have I don't even have a theory as to why this is occurring, but I've talked to a lot of people, as is my tendency. And, people have indicated they're just not quite feeling the whole holiday spirit. There is a tendency toward loneliness, a tendency toward feeling a little frustrated, actually, in many cases, very frustrated. And it could be about a variety of different things, family issues. It could be, finances, so many things. And I started reflecting, because I've been doing some teaching lately to some ministerial students, and my focus has been preparing them to deal with some of the, I call it the fallout of mediumship. And what I mean by that is there are times we get our people who are not particularly enthusiastic about what we do, to the point of where they feel we're somehow ineffectual or even irrelevant. That this business of communication between dimensions, between worlds, that was interesting and maybe even thought-provoking back in 1848 or maybe even 1930,
right.
But it doesn't seem to hold a lot of relevance now, until you begin to talk to people who are actually coming to folks like you and getting private consultations, private counseling. And I asked myself, when you start, and I've talked to a number of those folks, and I said, when you start to really analyze what comes out of that, what really comes out of that. Sometimes people say, well, the medium gave me some great insight because I was deeply concerned about, let's say, my children or a situation that's been consternating me for quite the while. But at the end of the process, at the end of that time, it really hits you in its simplicity, but in its profundity simultaneously, that, the greatest gift that our loved ones give us is that which we miss the most by their lack of physiological presence. And that is the gift, that is the sum and substance of life itself, and that is love. And at first I thought, I don't want to do another discussion or another, talk about love. It's because it's become such a hackneyed word. It's almost like the best and the worst 4-letter word we know. The best, because of course, if we interpret it correctly, it brings waves of feeling, positive feeling, productive feeling, growth-oriented feeling. If it's done poorly, it's like reading, it's like some of my friends who are traditional churchgoers. They read a prayer and they read it out of a prayer book, and it's rote, it's dry as bones. It's lost. It's like it says in scripture. It's like salt. It's lost its savor, and you think, what? And now, so I do tend to, not just this time of year, but in the progress of my work, because as you mentioned, I am spiritually fluid. I've
Yes.
gone a variety of directions, and I know I'm very confusing to some, but at the end of the day, I am still always have been and never have left. I'm in deep communion with the spiritualist faith for only one reason: it works. It works. And the reason it works is that if we dig deep enough and kind of separate, the wheats from the shafts, multiples of wheats.
Plural,
thank you. Multiples. We begin to see that what is it, that age-old question, what is it that we all are so desperate for? I believe from the moment we actually draw our first breath, many speculate prenatally, and then of course, as we release our last breath, what is the thing that we have so still sought? The radio is full of it. The television is full of it. Some will say I am full of it. That's a whole nother issue. But no, the serious point is that what we seek is love. We seek that sense of connectedness, first and foremost, to the divine, to whatever your highest and best concept of God may be, whether that be theistic and it be personal, or whether it be more universal, whether you are just a believer in quantum physics. It doesn't matter. It's when we make that identification with that understanding that there is I'll use the spiritualist term, an infinite intelligence that exists. We have no clue. And anybody who tells you they have a clue is very, very confused. When this infinite intelligence, we of course, we say never had a beginning. Some people think that infinite intelligence began with the Big Bang. A lot of different interesting concepts, a lot of interesting banter. But when you're late at night and you're reflecting within yourself, all you sense, if you do go within, honestly within, you sense that there is this, it's referred to as a power greater than myself, greater than my ego self, that I can identify, and that has been scripturally, not only in Judeo-Christian scripture, but in the Buddhist texts and the Hindu text and the Islamic text, just to name a few, that identifies that this is a power that is omnipresent. And here's something many people don't talk. We talk about omnipotence, all powerful, omniscience, all knowing, omnipresent, everywhere simultaneously. But we don't often use the term, which is another attribute of the divine principle, omniactive. And so we, as individuations, if I can also use that term, of that infinite oneness, we are constantly striving. That's what religion is. It means to bind back. We are constantly striving to identify and unify with that sense of presence. And what is that sense of presence? I'm glad you asked. That sense of presence is that sense of love, that sense of peace, but not peace, as it again says in scripture that we talk about the absence of conflict, but peace that is transcendental and innate, inherent understanding of the interconnected web of life, that we are all unified. Religion has struggled, and religion, frankly, is the most dangerous form of politics, by the way.
It can be.
It can be. Well,
it's not all that it is.
Not in my church. No,
Yes.
not in my church. No, but it can be the most dangerous form of politics, because when we talk about peace and we talk about love, it has to be inclusive. There can be no exclusivity clauses. There can be, I'm acceptable because I believe this or I feel that. It has to be regardless of who you are, where you are, what you've done. It's a laundry list, if you will. Love is the pervasive energy that binds us all together and is the stuff of who we are truly made of. And it irks me because often, and I hate getting irked. It's not a pleasant feeling. That all too often we interpret love as being, if it's not, many people, sadly, if it's not eros, it doesn't exist.
Right.
Other people view it as self-sacrifice, martyrdom, to give until I can't give anymore. It hurts. I hate it, but I have to keep doing it because somebody in a body of scripture said, love ye one another, or whatever the
golden rule.
the golden rule, all of that. And yet we seek, and we don't know it more often than not, the kind of love that I think, it flips a switch. It flips kind of an automatic pilot that gets us to become natural. It connects us to our true nature. We become we act as though, we act as if we were we have it within us, but we just don't cognize it. The totality of the infinite, which is love without condition and without expectation. And that goes back, I shouldn't say it does actually go back, but in modern parlance, it's the idea of the concept of mindfulness, the idea of living in the only time that exists or ever has existed, the eternal now. And if we can, in our meditation, in our prayer,
in our mediumship,
and in the mediumship, in the preparation, especially for as we work, cognize that and identify, and here's the word that so many times we kind of, I don't want to say we ignore it, but we just kind of slough over it. Unify in it, that we feel at one with it. We don't feel disjointed.
Right. Albert Einstein's unified field.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, it's once that occurs, but we sometimes forget that. We were talking earlier about if someone comes to a professional medium and gets a consultation and so forth, and what's the thing that people talk about? And I find this fascinating because a lot of times, unless you're, and you and me, we might forget this a little bit because we're marinated. Pardon me, excuse me.
Totally steeped in it like tea.
Absolutely. Chamomile tea. Thank you.
That's what he's drinking.
We forget that the so-called average person out there still views this. And again, I mentioned earlier, and it needs to be addressed sometimes with some contempt, because there is still a humongous lack of understanding of what this really is and what its potential is for the upliftment of the human consciousness. Mm-hmm. But there are also many people who have a very limited view of its potential, and where I find there's a lot of education about what I'm talking about is on things like, I still watch it. I watch Teresa Caputo, the Long Island Medium, and a few of these other programs, not because I want to be enamored of her skills. That ship left me a long time ago. I've dealt with hundreds of mediums, and everybody's different, and everybody has some really amazing, unique abilities. But what really still warms my heart, pardon me, is when people talk about the experience, the sense of connectedness to their loved ones,
Yes.
that they thought they had lost forever. The sense of love that came through, that they actually, I'll use the word almost palpably felt, and that the peace that I will, not being Shirley MacLaine, I'll go out on a limb here and say it, that peace does surpass human understanding, because it is a level of awareness, a level of joy that is transcendental. I can remember times when various mediums, in the church, let's say during a church service, would come to me and they'd bring back, whether it be my dad or my uncle or someone that I've cared about. And, it could even be somebody I haven't given, an enormous amount of thought to lately because, life gets busy and so forth. And to be drawn back into that sense that not only are they there, but the motivation for them being there is what I have tried to gain, again, from the moment of my first breath onward, a sense of being loved, a sense of being okay. All of those things that we seem to struggle with in this life, and we still haven't figured out that no matter how many books of philosophy we read or how many great self-help books we read, at the end of the day, pardon me for being biased, it's the medium that comes forth and says, great, let me show you something. Let me, not in a visual sense, but let me have you feel something. Now they don't necessarily vocalize that, but in the dynamic of the interaction between the medium and the client, there is that healing. And that's what I mean by, these television programs. You hear these people talk about being able to finally accept on a very core level the healing love that has always been there, but that is now translated into and through their loved ones, so that they can indeed not just move on with their lives, but to do so with a sense of peace, a sense of expectation that they will be reunited with their loved ones. Yeah. It doesn't matter what you believe. I'll be blunt. I don't care what you believe.
He doesn't care.
I don't care. And the reason I say that is I've done enough reading and research and experience over 43 years in ministry that I am absolutely convinced that when we focus on that love, focus on that I call it a divine intention, that it is done unto us as we believe, that intention is then the gateways are open, the floodgates, if you will, are open, and it allows those loved ones to come through. I will say one other thing in regard to that it's not the kind of love that, and you hear people talk about this, some of our detractors, well, if you're going to feel that way, my God, then everybody would be committing suicide and trying to get over to the other side, and like a bunch of lemmings jumping off the side of a cliff. That's not what it is. That's never what it's been. It's been the blessed assurance that you are okay by divine right. You are okay by divine principle. And that when you make your transition You will have a choice to communicate back with those who would wish to communicate back with you. It is a natural phenomena. It is a normal phenomena.
Yes.
You don't want to become obsessed with anything. I like chocolate covered raisins. If I eat a small package, I'm fine. If I eat 2 pounds, I'm not so much fine. It's no different with anything else in life, including any religious activity or spiritual activity. You can, believe it or not, meditate too much.
Certain people have,
believe it or
put
not,
it too much.
Yep.
To
And
the test.
and it produces, I don't believe life-threatening impacts, but it can kind of send you in a bit of a spiral, and you have to. And it's what mediumship does in that context is the same thing we have to do with every aspect of life. It draws us back to center. Pardon my voice, I'm a little froggy today. It draws us back to center. And you mentioned a while back, when we did the missing people, especially during the holidays, whether you identify yourself as a spiritualist or I think so many of us, we'd like to think of ourselves strictly as spiritualists. I've kind of recently identified myself as an omnist. I find good in all faith traditions, all religious expressions, and I get more presents and more days off. So I follow but in all seriousness, I jest, that the idea of accepting and being open and not having to stress and strain about life, that ultimately life will draw you in if you allow it to, if you accept and allow life as it is expressed as love. You will not be worried about what you believe, what you don't believe, as long as, again, you take your, I'll use the phrase, belief system, and hopefully utilize it in positive ends, not only for self, but for those around and about you, in loving tolerance, acceptance. One of my favorite quotations is Francis of Assisi says, "I preach the gospel, and sometimes I use words." And our spirit loved ones, they may not come to us, always in a verbal sense, but they take that love and they express it to us through the medium. Yes. And here's the good news: through your mediumship, everyone has a certain amount of either just what I call psychic ability. I prefer to use it's my old school term, soul sense. Everybody has some soul sense. And if you take some soul sense and you mix it with common sense, you've got a great mix there.
There's your recipe.
There's a Christmas recipe for you: soul sense and common sense, so that that you can count on the guidance of loved ones, and that maybe even if they don't provide, what I'd call heartfelt advice per se, it is that presence of love. It is that presence of, you're okay. You've got this. People joke about, I do a lot of cooking when my wife lets me. And I had a lady ask me one time, "Well, how much of this, ingredient do you put in?" I said, "Well, I just listened for my ancestors, and they usually will tell me, that's enough, Ron."
It's true.
And I've seen people actually,
they will cook that way.
Yeah. They will cook that way, and it's great.
It is great to know that they're there, and another little pinch.
Yeah, really. It's about being open. It's about being open and expecting, here's the metaphysics, expecting good and only good.
That's right. The highest and the best of the outcome for this.
And I find two things that I think may help people. I know sometimes, and I don't know, I honestly don't remember if we talked about this the last time about missing your loved ones during a holiday. I take the time especially during the holiday season, to remember in mind, in my consciousness, those people whom, as the old expression goes, used to rub me in rock salt. People who were not kind to me, people who were actually pretty mean-spirited. And I have to take the time to reflect on the teachings of Yeshua, otherwise known as Jesus, the teachings of the Buddha and other great minds who understood the dynamic of how the energy of the universe works. I have to take the time to look to our principles and think about that the door to reformation is never closed against any soul, here or hereafter, that you can heal relationships even though people are long gone in the physical. You might not believe it, because you might say to yourself, oh, that's easy for you to say, or, well, maybe you can do it, but you don't know what they said or did. I said, don't care. Now, obviously, I do care. I don't want you to, do something you're not comfortable with. But there comes a point where we have to be, I will use the phrase, spiritually mature, and say, at the end of it, let's assume, just as a kind of a metaphor, maybe I don't know if that's even the right term, that there comes a point where all souls will be reunited. It says in Scripture, not one shall be lost, and I believe that with all my heart. All souls are united. But that's the thing. We can't say everybody but them. And spirit is, I believe, especially during these holy days, these days when we are called to identify with our spirituality, to identify with the God within us. Mm-hmm. We are called to maybe reflect on those. Of course, I want to commune with anybody and everybody that I love. But I also want to express, hopefully, in a greater maturity, maybe not forgiveness. Sometimes that is not always possible, but hopefully a little more understanding, a little bit more kindness, because we talk about, I love the Dalai Lama when he says, loving kindness is my religion. Well, I'll take it a step further. It is my religion as well. But I want to, this is a time when we express that kindness, not just for those here, but hereafter. It is an uncommon practice, not in all cultures, but in some. Some still do this, and I agree with it 100%, that there are designated days where we pray for those who have made the transition. In the spiritualist understanding, the more common understanding, it's like, well, you've passed away, you see the forest for the trees, you've seen the light, gone down the tube, the angels are there, they've come and taken you home, you've met your mom and all the other people, have a pleasant afterlife. We don't recognize back in the day that they used to have rescue circles. They used to have specific mediumistic experiences, which, by the way, I do not recommend over the holiday season, please.
Yeah.
But in fact, I don't recommend them unless you really know what you're doing. And if you don't, call me sometime. I'll help you. But it is only an example I bring to your attention. There used to be a focus within the movement of, let's call it, praying for those who, by every standard you can imagine in human experience, do not deserve your prayers. It is creating that energy of understanding, moving hopefully toward forgiveness, that moves us toward a greater sense of releasing all of those negativities and etc., so that we can again continue to recognize the interconnected web of life, and what our part in it is to be a healer and a helper not someone who is only consternated and, and as they say, if you can't be kind, at least don't be unkind. And I know I brought this up at the last time we did talk about the holidays. Again, you don't have to be a spiritualist because this is cultural. This transcends so many different nationalities and so forth. But I can still remember, and I always reflect on it, and I do it every single year. This Christmas, it'll probably be because of family being all over the place, just my wife and myself, and our two straight men, Buck and Shadow, the Wonder Dogs. And at Christmas Eve dinner, we will put out a chair and a place setting. And that is for, now in some traditions, primarily Christian traditions, that is for the Christ child. Mm-hmm. Perfectly reasonable. In our tradition, historically, even I go back in my own family, it was for the unseen guest, the soul that feels lost, the family member who perhaps in life didn't feel welcomed. It helps us focus on what they needed but didn't get, but also perhaps what we've needed over the years and in some instances didn't get. And it gives us an opportunity to give unto others that gift of understanding, that gift of hope. We place a lot of hope in that little baby in the manger, and righteously so, because that little baby represents so much of the evolution, the coming evolution of the human species. A lot of people don't think that way, but I believe that. And so my attitude is to encourage people to reach out to each other, to be together, like some of my Jewish friends, have a nosh, maybe, and, have a cup of tea. Sure. But also that in the greatest gift of, again, going back to the central theme, the greatest gift of mediumship is that love. If you were to just get, quote, data coming from the medium, if there was no feeling, healing feeling that you would get from it, people would get readings once every 20 years. But often people get readings with a certain bit of regularity because they need to have I call it the recharge. And it's not the information. It is seldom the information, because most of their intuitive faculties, you're giving them what they already know. I mean, how many times have you done this? You'll tell some, oh yeah, I've always felt that. It's like, well, then why are you coming to me? Well, it's the encouragement, of course, and the affirmation, but ultimately, when they leave, it is that gift of the love of our spirit loved ones, our spiritual guides, our teachers, that shines through, that makes us feel like, the Grinch when he got the meaning of Christmas. All of a sudden his little heart, burgeoned. And that's what it is, a release of constraint. It is a release of tension, fear, horrible thing we're dealing with in the world today. Everybody's scared to death. And the dichotomy, of course, or the sad thing is death is an amazing release of fear, but that's not why we're here. We have been called here, each and every one of us, to do our part to release love, not fear.
That's right.
And so if you are a practicing medium or a student medium, you have an enormous, and I don't say this to make you nervous, responsibility. Yes. To think about, if you will, please, some of the things I've shared today. But beyond that, even if you can do things incrementally, in your work to help people reconcile themselves and recognize that they are, by mandate of infinite intelligence, by mandate of what I will call the infinite Holy Spirit, they are good and only good. And that their loved ones come back to make that affirmation, to make that confirmation, to say, not only are we going to meet again, but it's a guarantee. It's a given. And people say, well, no, you don't know what I did in 1978. And they, as representatives of a higher, more infinite consciousness, say, irrelevant. You are okay just the way you are. Most people, with very, very few exceptions, are trying the best they can with what the information and the experiences they have in front of them to do a decent job of living. We may not all agree with each other how they're doing things, or even what might appear to be their motivations or whatever. But again, at the end of it all, so to speak, and I hate to use the word end because there is no end, we must have a spirit of unity. There is strength, there is power, there is healing in unity. And that is the greatest gift that our spirit loved ones give us. The unification between the so-called living and the so-called dead, affirming not only the principles taught in spiritualism, but all those universal, loving, kind teachings of the great teachers, the masters, so that eventually we do kind of do one of these and go, ow, I get it. I'm responsible. I create or co-create my own life. Mm-hmm. That infinite spirit gives me the energy and the raw materials, but it is my use of mind, the one mind, that projects out into the world. Can I do it more lovingly? Well, my experiences in mediumship have taught me that there is only one way, and that is to do it more lovingly, because we are also taught by studying the natural laws of nature. And I'll paraphrase it in a religious context. We do reap what we sow. And our loved ones are saying, stop sowing fear, stop sowing negativity. True. And whether they were making those pronouncements in 1848 or 1948 or projecting into 2048, that message is going to be the same, because it is the ultimate truth. And until we get it and test it, nobody's asking you to accept any of this on, quote, faith. Accept it only if you test it and see how it works for you. You may have to make some tweaks and twitches to make it make a little bit more sense. You may have to, but at the bottom of the bottom line, to have loving kindness, openness, unity, all of those things. And that all comes through in that beautiful, I was going to say prize package. This isn't what is it?
Price is Right.
No, the
Bob
clearing.
Barker?
Yeah, Bob Barker. May God rest his soul. This isn't the, like
prize package.
Yeah. No, you do a good, she does a great Vanna White, don't you think? But at the end of that understanding, we figure out that if we try this, it might work. And yet it's amazing if you study human history, and I'll make it easy on you, over the last 8,000 years, how we consistently say, yeah, that's all nice, but that's not the real world. The real world is, competition and hard driving. And then look at the most famous ghost story in the last 200 years. Christmas Carol.
Christmas Carol, which I did a show about with David Wasserman years ago.
Yep.
So watch that one.
David's amazing.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: he had this curmudgeon, this man who by his own words, basically identifies himself as a crusty old piece of cheese, comes out and is visited by 3 ghosts. Now, look, folks.
4.
4?
Jacob Marley.
Forgive me, Jacob. Well, he was the antecedent, but okay. But nonetheless, she's absolutely right. And we can sit there. Well, no, that was just metaphorical, or that's just literary license. No, if you've ever had subjective personal guidance in a dream, in a vision, or a more objective guidance through let's say a trance medium or a clairvoyant, the messages that are given forth in the Christmas Carol are the same. Don't ignore your brothers and sisters who are in need. Stop being a jerk. I'm paraphrasing, of course. I could rewrite some of these things, but ultimately, and at the end of these visitations, these mediumistic communications, what does he discover? Wow, I could have had a V8. I could have been happy. I could have been healthy. I could have been loved. All I had to have done was seen how I impact my brothers and sisters, the ghost of Christmas yet to come. Business is business. What's my business? Humanity is your business, Jacob Marley. No, Ebenezer Scrooge. It may be, some might consider that kind of a hokey story, but you know what? I follow that just like I would follow any holy scripture that was ever written. Take your pick. That's me. But regardless, those are some of the things that I conceive are the greatest gift, that are wrapped up in that beautiful, I was going to say, when I said prize package, it's like Publishers Clearinghouse. Oh, that's what I was thinking.
The big old check.
The big old check. But the payoff, the big old check, is not just feeling good about yourself or even feeling good about others, but beginning to see the demonstration of our interaction with the energy, the vibration, the generous life of the spirit, as we often say in Unitarian Universalism. If you can do that and get that, you become changed. Yes. You can either be, I love this, you can either be a great example, or you will become a stern warning. I think that you'd be much better served and would serve the family of man much better if you were not a stern warning, but chose to be, as Ishua chose to be, a great example. Happy holidays.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome, Ron. It's so beautiful to know that when we communicate with our spirit loved ones and also with other souls,
right?
That mediumship has that ability, that understanding of giving comfort and healing and validating a client's own spiritual experiences.
Absolutely.
And also education about life after death and soul to soul contact, because that's really an important aspect of spiritualism, the mediumship that spiritualism embraces, that
Absolutely.
Sacred joy that is part of it.
There is that important question, and I think I almost refer to it every time I preach in a spiritualist church, the question of Job. Mm-hmm. If a man die, does he live again? That is, of course, the foundational evidential necessity so that we can begin to build on that. And again, if you just study the history, not just of the spiritualist movement, the history of the human family, the evidence of the evidential mediumship that came through so many people. I think back even, I'm so grateful that I came into this understanding and into this movement at a time when there was so much literature and so many good teachers and so forth. But I can still remember people who did this naturally. The little old lady down the street who read tea leaves. And now, grant you, tea leaf reading is not a part of the Orthodox traditional spiritualist movement, but it is part of the what I call psychic sciences, so to speak. And this woman was amazing. Who taught her? Her mother, her mother's mother. There is generational education in becoming more intuitive,
Yes.
just like there's generational instruction about becoming a good evidentiary-based medium. And again, I only wish my Christmas wish, and I was reflecting this. I was teaching a couple of days ago, is that someday we as a culture, a world culture, would begin to view this as normal and natural, and not view it as some kind of either aberration or anomaly. I don't have an answer to that. I don't have an answer to how that comes about, except, of course, what so many of my colleagues and friends do here at Lilydale and other places in the country. They put their best foot forward. They give you the best possible communion with spirit that you can possibly have. And then they encourage you to study, to read, to become acquainted with not just historical facts, who fought for the Fox sisters back in 1849 or whatever. No, but the philosophical and the theological evolution of this.
Mm-hmm.
Are there problems in it? Oh, sweet Jesus in the morning, yes. This is a rough and tumble expression of religion and spirituality, always has been, because of its proclivity toward free thought, because nobody wants to be told what to believe. That's and right. How to believe it. So that lends itself not to the best organizational structures in the course of human history. But on the other hand, if we approach it with that understanding and glean from it some of the more interesting dynamics, we have a movement that understood, and I brought this up before, that people shouldn't own other people. We stood foursquare for the abolition of slavery. We stood foursquare for that women and men are absolutely equal, not mostly, not somewhat, absolutely. It goes on and on. If you study some of the history of the British spiritualist movement, they've done a lot of work with anti-vivisection of animals. The spiritualist church stood foursquare and said, "You will not be cutting up a bunny."
Okay.
Sorry, to forgive me.
Go there.
You will not be committing an atrocity toward one of God's woodland creatures to test your mascara or whatever. So I think I've said enough. Or I'm sure she thinks I've said enough.
There's far, and then there's too far.
Yes, I admit there are times I walk that bridge too far.
Yes. Yeah, but what you've been saying is so important in terms of people understanding some of the depth that mediumship can bring to their life.
Thank you. Yeah,
as a medium, it's so beautiful to be part of that connection and that communion with spirit. And I feel a vicarious thrill go through me when I feel that love that the spirit loved one is having for that client, because that love never dies and it's conveyed so beautifully. And when the client is really in that receptive space, to have that love, not in a desperate, needy place, but in a accepting mode.
Absolutely.
It's gorgeous what can evolve with that. And it goes beyond evidence, as you said.
Yeah.
It goes into the depths of the very feeling of the emotion and the remembrance of who we are when we bring our best selves to this occasion, but also laughing about the flaws and the quirks of the humanness that is in existence there. And there's such enlightenment and reassurance that comes from mediumship that, if I've had this happen so many times with clients that they weren't quite sure if they had a soul. They kind of got off the path of that understanding, but because of a session, they're all of a sudden realize, oh, that's right. If I can communicate with other soul, I'm a soul. I want to live from that space of the light and of that intentional living. That's so part of our spiritualist principles. Yep. And I'm glad that helps them. I was in discussion with a lady just yesterday, and she was talking about the arc of love that she had experienced in her relationship with her husband, who passed 4 years ago. And there's such a difference between the honeymoon stages and then having to raise children and get through the difficulties of the dynamic of their relationship because he was alcoholic. So there are all these things, and then having to watch him go through his illness and the different love that was there, and just being able to take drives with him, and how she remembers how she was like, ugh, we're going on another drive. And now she thinks about that with love. So it's interesting how things change.
Perspective.
And when someone passes, and what a blessing you see them in life. And I know that she in particular has felt another side of her husband in the aftermath of the passing. So there is an arc to our characters and to other people's characters. Yeah. And I love the fact that mediumship helps to bring that more into focus for people.
Yeah, it is a depth, and you've described it perfectly and beautifully. It is a depth that really it's worth the effort. It is beyond worth the effort, because I can think back to persons that I've had difficulty with, and they've made their transition. And the average person, is either going to say, well, dead is dead, que sera, sera, or, well, maybe after the resurrection, God will put us in a room and we'll figure this out. And, and I'm not trying to be glib. I that's my tendency, but you get my idea.
Yes.
Whereas what I was able to do, because I was, really saturated to the kneecaps in our principles, I wanted a way of life. I didn't want a religion that was symbolic or only symbolic, or just, a matter of rituals or ceremonies. I wanted a code to live by that was meaningful
and healing.
Thank you. And when I was able to take that principle about the door to reformation not being closed, I was actually able to heal that relationship in such a way where I had to apologize for errors in my judgment or expression and ask their forgiveness. And that's something that if you would have said to me, you're going to ask for this person's forgiveness in 10 years or 15 years, I would have said, yeah.
Big scoff at that.
Hardy, har. That's not going to happen. But it did. It did. And I think it was, and the other piece of it is that you begin to understand, like I said earlier, everybody's just trying to do the best they can. They really are.
Yeah.
I love Ram Dass. In fact, if any of you ever hear, there's a singer, she's a kind of a balladeer, I guess the word would be. I think her name is Gretchen Peters. I'm forgive me, I may be messing that up, but there's a song that this young lady has written, and it's a paraphrase of what Ram Dass, the great American philosopher and guru, shared. He said, our major reason for being here is to walk each other home. Walk each other home.
Right.
So if you've got somebody that's already, in quotation marks, home, that doesn't mean you don't need to get walked there. And who's to say they're not going to be the ones walking you?
It's amazing.
And that's the amazing part. And that's the gift. And so many times when people say to me that, you know, and you read it on Facebook, my God, it's just, it's everywhere this year for some reason, who they miss, who they've lost, and so forth and so on.
Yes.
And it breaks your heart. It breaks your heart because you want to reach through the telephone or the thing and say, hey, it doesn't have to be like this. They're there. You may not know it. You may not be conscious of it. They are there. If there is the slightest identification between the two of you, and you've expressed an open, honest receptivity to them, you will hopefully, I can't guarantee this, you will sense them. And even if you do not, many times I will advise people, talk to them like I'm talking to you now. Many times I'm driving in my automobile, and all of a sudden I will start thinking in the Polish language. Thinking in the Polish language. Right. That's my spirit nudge, if I can use that word. That's my cue that my dad's with me. And so then we have a little conversation. Do I hear him? No, I'll be honest. No, I don't have clairaudience, and I don't actually.
But it's think talking.
But it's a sense of, I'm here. You're a schmuck, but I love you anyway. I'm waiting for you. And that brings me more comfort, because again, even though I knew that there is no death and there are no dead, the occasional nudge, the occasional hi, how are you, is a universe of blessing.
Yes.
I don't need to know what's going to happen. I don't need to know why it's going to happen or where. I think prophecy and prognostication have their place in all psychic science. But at the end of the day, our purpose is to bring that gift of love, that gift of acceptance and unity. And I believe that's the message of that little baby in the manger, which is why I have such a deep devotion to that little baby in the manger, because I believe that what he taught is dynamically reflected in the teachings and the philosophy of spiritualism. Mm-hmm. There are theological aspects that I find anathematic, but that's a whole nother sermon for another day.
That's right.
But the philosophy that God is love, as Paul said, and he who chooses to love shall truly find God. That's the message that's the good news of the gospel of the Christ. And it is the good news of the gospel of modern spiritualism.
That's right. Beautiful. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much, Ron. We really appreciate you being here today.
Operators are standing by. Call today.
Oh, how funny.
Do I get to give them the free toasters yet? No.
Free toasters?
No.
Oh my goodness. Well, I do need to make a few announcements.
Please. Please.
Those of you who are interested in developing mediumship, I do have a new mediumship circle series round that starts in January. So you can go ahead and get registered on my website, willawhite.com.
Good teacher.
Aw, thank you so much. I have a solid group of students, and this particular circle series is open to all levels, whether you are a beginner or advanced. You are put into partner exercises with people on a weekly basis it's an 8-week circle series on Monday nights. And you can find more information about that on my website, willawhite.com, through the online classes, because it's through Zoom. So that's how you would interact with the other students. And we have a lesson, a lecture activity, and then breakout sessions. So people really enjoy learning that particular way. So I wanted to make sure you knew that registration was open for that. There will not be a show of Wednesdays with Willa on next Wednesday or the following Wednesday. Why? Because that's Christmas, December 25th and January 1st. So no shows for the next 2 weeks. You're welcome to look back at the archive videos of shows, and I will, of course, try to post a few so you can watch some of the old ones that have been, oldies but goodies, shall we say.
We've had a few.
Yes.
We've had a few.
And then January 8th, I'll be back with you with Colin Bates. We're going to be talking about sitting in the power, which is such an amazing understanding of how you can prepare yourself mediumistically. And then on January 15th, I'll have Suzanne Giesman, who is a well-known medium. She's going to be here to talk about the awakened way. And she's a wonderful evidential medium. And I think you'll really feel that that's special. Both Colin and Suzanne have been on the show before. We're glad to welcome them back to Wednesdays with Willa. And I'll have more great shows for you. So make sure you like, share, follow, subscribe, all of those things so I can keep bringing wonderful episodes of Wednesdays with Willa to you. And I appreciate so much everyone tuning in. I wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we're so thrilled that you're on this journey to educate yourself and to evolve your soul, just as we are on. It's a continual journey. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Ron. It's been
always a privilege. It's always a privilege. And yes, may you all have a truly blessed holiday season. Yeah. And may you celebrate that feeling of love, which is they talk about, it's the most wonderful time of the year. It's because we feel more loving. And people always say, well, it'd be too bad we couldn't do this beyond Christmas Day. Why not?
Your choice.
Your choice. Tag. You're it.
You're it. All right. Well, we'll see you on the flip side of the new year. And don't forget to attend Ron's event that's coming up for the wonderful way of resetting yourself for the new year. All right. Many blessings, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.